Hey, welcome, Jeff Johnston with the Living Undeterred podcast. I've seen a lot of this young man lately. Kevin Hyer with the Hyer Calling Foundation out in the Philadelphia area is my guest today. Like most of my guests I've met on social media, I'm excited to actually shake his hand. We are going to be stopping at during the Living Undeterred US Tour 2. We're making a stop in Philly, and I'll have a chance to meet him. And today we want to talk about a lot of things. People know my passion. They know my why. But we're here to find out your passion, Kevin, and your why. And in the small amount of time I've known you, literally, months, you've accomplished so much in such a short amount of time. And today's a special day for you. We talked about this before you jumped on. And I know you wanted to talk a little bit about that. So welcome to the Living Undeterred podcast. I'm super excited to see what roads we go down because mental health doesn't have any boundaries or any limitations.
No, it does not.
So welcome.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Jeff. No, it's a real privilege to be here because, I haven't known you very long, but when I met you, and I've just seen it every time we've communicated since, we're so aligned around the importance of breaking stigma. The stress and isolation of the pandemic have made the topic of mental health never more important than it's ever been in our society. And so often within mental health is substance use. Mm-hmm. And that's my particular passion, but it's all part of the same ball of wax. And I am the CEO of the Hyer Calling Foundation.
Yeah. So what's your mission statement? What's the objective of the Hyer Calling Foundation?
What the objective is, it's a big one, but we think boldly. We dream of a world where a prior substance use disorder is not a barrier to professional success. Mm-hmm. I'm an employment attorney, and I'm also in recovery from meth addiction. We do a lot around breaking stereotypes here. Addiction crosses all backgrounds, knows no stereotypes, and substances don't either. Whether you're addicted to alcohol, marijuana, methamphetamine, opiates, it's all the same heartbreak at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. My case happened to be methamphetamine. When I got into recovery, I founded the foundation to use my employment law skills and my network and my passion to give other people in recovery a second chance at a career. And it's what gets me up every day.
I commend you because I've never done drugs myself. I hear meth is like the hardest one to quit.
It's probably the most addictive drug. It's right up there. There's no competition, but it's certainly a very addictive drug.
Yeah. So how long were you a meth user?
Around 18 months. I got addicted at the age of 39. I had never used drugs. It was a momentary mistake, caught up in a moment of insecurity as I stared 40 in the face. And I pulled the short straw. I got addicted the first time. And within 8 weeks of trying methamphetamine, I was shooting up in drug houses and very much out of a job in the blue chip law firm I practiced in Philadelphia. And I did lose my job over my addiction. And I did end my career in prestige law over it. Now, I came back. My law licenses never got affected. I now do this, but it's part of the consequences that come with addiction. And I spiraled for almost 18 months until I overdosed on methamphetamine that had fentanyl in it. And I overdosed. I was on dialysis for 10 days, but I lived, obviously. And what I took from that experience was the desire to go give back. And that's why we call the foundation Hyer Calling. It's a play on words of my last name.
I love it.
Hyer.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Hyer Calling. And that's what we do every day. So the last 2 years, our team and I, we're out there just giving folks in recovery who are serious about recovery a second chance.
So today's your 2-year anniversary, right?
Yeah, it is.
Well, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's I get often perplexed about how I can add value to this whole mental health train wreck that we seem to be on, because initially, and your story is amazing. I mean, was Narcan involved at all ever?
No, it was not at the time, but it was not, no.
Because now Narcan, I've met, so many people that have been saved and numerous times on Narcan, and, it seems to be coming out to be a lot more acceptable as an option, but especially for people that have struggled a little bit with harm reduction philosophically, and then they see what Narcan can do. I know it's encouraging to see Narcan really becoming a lot more, even though the $50 now, whatever it costs to get it over the counter. That's something that we got to work on as advocates to get that price down to zero ultimately.
Yeah, we do.
It's just
It's funny you mentioned that. It's one of our initiatives that the media first picked up on was where I, as an employment lawyer, I've been in-house with a major union, the SEIU, and then I was on the other side, the management side of it with a huge corporation before I went into a firm. We said to employers, look, it's great when you sponsor a little league team or something.
yeah.
But give back to your community by educating your staff on how to use Narcan. Imagine if every employer in America took a half an hour or an hour on a Friday afternoon and taught their staff how to use it. And if they had the resources, gave everyone a unit of Narcan. Can you imagine the potential that could have to save lives?
You may know this, but what percentage of people saved by Narcan are non-first responders, non-police? Isn't it like in the 80% range or something?
That sounds right. I don't know the exact statistics.
I saw something that
it
just validates that we need to get Narcan in the hands of people that, normally wouldn't carry it, because.
And I know of stories. I'm thinking of one in particular outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where someone got trained how to use it at work. And that same day drove home. And I don't know every detail of it, but the bottom line was that same day they were able to use it to save a life. It's ought to be like using a fire extinguisher, I think, or giving CPR. It's just something people should know how to do.
So let's talk about stigma, because I know that's a big thing for you. When I give my talks, I talk a lot about the two things that I think we can do to change the narrative. And one is the idea of labels, like what we identify people as, like an addict, a user, depressed. I mean, we anoint labels onto people. And, quite honestly, if it wasn't for insurance, probably 80% of the diagnoses we have wouldn't even be diagnoses. But insurance companies need a label on a form to put what's your problem. You can't just say, I look out the window and think about, my vacation, and then that's not a label. But if someone puts attention deficit disorder down, well, now I can file a claim, or I identified what your, what evil entity is attached to your back. It's like an exorcism. And I'm really out to try to change how we label. I just think there's too many of them. We don't need more labels. We need less. And really, again, take like our son Seth, who was given Adderall at 16 for attention deficit disorder. Had somebody presented it differently to him, and said, hey, Seth, you don't have, first of all, you don't have a disorder, because everyone has attention deficit. Everybody's at some point, their hands move, their legs move a little bit. Everyone's minds are always racing. I mean, how many people don't have a racing mind? It's like zero. I mean, literally every human being has a racing mind. So why do we put this label of disorder on kids when in reality it's more than likely a spectrum where, Kevin, you have a certain level of attention deficit. I'm like an 8. Some people are 1, but we still have it. And I think if we presented it to kids that we all have this thing, not you have it and Kevin doesn't, right off the bat, even if that isn't 100% accurate, we tell kids that there's a goddamn fat guy up there in a red outfit with a beard delivering presents over Christmas, which is insane. And then we can't flip the narrative and tell people that it's not a disorder. It's just something that makes you human. So on one hand, we don't tell the truth to kids on a lot of things, but then on other things, we feel like, well, we struggle with that. And I'm like, how about this? How about you get a 13-year-old that maybe in all sense of purposes medically is attention deficit? How about we just tell them that your inability to focus is what makes you unique. It's your special thing. It's like Superman, Batman. They all have special powers. We don't frickin' do that, Kevin. And I will go to my grave trying to change how we do this. Now, you and I, the dads and the neighbors and the doctors and the experts, we can throw around these terms all we want. But why the hell does a kid have to know it's a disorder? That's where I draw the line. I'm not going to argue with a clinician that attention deficit isn't a disorder. It's genetic, whatever. I don't care. Kids don't have to know that. Where's the benefit of telling a kid it's a disorder?
I'm not sure there are benefits to those
Zero.
labels because they're so limiting. Right. And they take it into adulthood. And my thing is more substance use disorder than mental health diagnoses, although again it's the same ball of wax.
It is.
What I try to say is something similar to your talk about, what's a superpower. All these things can be used to strengthen us.
Yeah.
And for me in recovery, I try to say, and I say to the organizations we educate on this, the recovery experience is actually a superpower.
Yeah, I love it.
The qualities you
Yeah.
develop. Oh, it's true. It really is true. The qualities you develop in recovery are what you want in a leader: humility,
right,
perseverance,
right, patience,
the ability to look in the mirror. That's one of the
living undeterred, right?
Yeah. Accountability,
yeah.
Gratitude. I mean, and even if you're not going to be a leader in the organization, not everyone can be. We always need to have our foot soldiers. Recovery makes you a hard worker, deeply grateful, appreciative, humility. I mean, there's so many things I could get into about what it does to help an organization. So we frame this as DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and think it actually strengthens an organization. So, I say to employers, you ought to hire people in recovery. What if, just think about when you were trying to fill positions, you said, we're looking to hire women, people of color, LGBT individuals, and people in recovery. What if you were to take job postings and share them with the alumni networks of rehabs? There's an amazing talent pool out there that's underutilized right now. And it's those of us in recovery who want a second chance and deserve a second chance.
Well, one way to validate how experience and have a lived experience can be a good thing, like you just said, is that most of the best advocates I know, their resume is full of recovery stories. They have they may not have a Harvard degree and all the other stuff, but if you tell them all the times that they've passed out or they've drove drunk or they've said something stupid to somebody, heck, they got a great resume that they could use that we could lean into them. But the best advocates I know come from places of absolute chaos and misery and horrific events. And you're no different. I'm no different. Most of the people we talk to every day. So I think, I came into this probably not a harm reductionist. And I kind of really came into it thinking it kind of was a moral failing that, but then as I mature in this industry, I can see that it's a combination of many things. It's not one thing. It's but I think the moral failing stigma that society puts on addicts and so forth is frustrating. And a good example I can tell you is and again, I'm going to say this, and it's my show. I guess I can say what I want, right, Kevin? I don't want to really offend anybody, but I want to just make a point here. But let's say you have a child, 23 years old, and that individual were to die of something that wasn't, i.e., their fault. So it could be cancer, car accident, murder, drowning, things that really are tragic, okay? And then you have a 23-year-old that, makes a decision to buy heroin. Maybe they're struggling with certain things, and then they put it in their arm consciously and it has fentanyl and they die. You have two 23-year-old people that die. Society looks at those deaths so differently. If I run a GoFundMe for the 23-year-old that drowned or the 23-year-old that died by cancer or whatever, money will come plowing in because there's a lot of empathy and compassion. It's like, oh, that's too bad that happened. But if I try to run a GoFundMe because, my son died of heroin or somebody else died of, even suicide, it's like, I don't think society looks at that death equally. Like, well, Seth actually kind of brought it upon himself. I mean, I know no one ever told me this to my face, but I could see it in people's eyes that early when Seth died is like, well, Jeff, I kind of can't be surprised this was going to happen. That was the road he was on when he was put needles in his arms. And I'm like, that doesn't mean he's any less human. It doesn't mean anything to me if he would have died by a car accident or suicide or overdose. It's fucking death, and he's not here. And that is all that's important to anybody that's a true advocate. How they die, the only thing I can tell you is that the deaths of despair, suicide, alcohol, and overdose, which is 825 Americans every freaking day, Kevin. The only thing I can say about the common theme is that most of those deaths were preventable and most were predictable.
Yes.
And that's what doesn't make it tragic to me. It makes it unfortunate and unnecessary. But
and
tragic
heartbreaking.
is that child that drowns in a pool. Tragic is that car accident. That's truly tragic. That my heart goes out for that, and for the parents that have lost kids and stuff through overdose, suicide, and alcohol. My heart goes out as well. But what frustrates me is those 825 deaths every day. Those don't have to happen. They don't. I think we can
Well,
prevent a number of them.
here's a perspective as someone who used to put a needle in my arm. All right, that comes from pain. Now, I was shooting up crystal meth, not heroin, but it's all the same heartbreak. Okay, you're not thriving at life when you're doing that.
Right.
That's pain that you are trying to compensate for, and everyone's pain is different.
You're
But it doesn't really
self-medicating at
matter
that
what-
point, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We need to, in my opinion, offer people a real second chance. Hold them accountable when they do commit crimes, because I do believe in that. If you're out selling drugs, the law has to place some limitations on that behavior. But
Yeah.
you can incarcerate someone appropriately. You can put someone on probation and then give them a real second chance.
Right.
Recognize the strengths they bring to the table. People who've been to prison, quite frankly, many of them are very strong people.
Mm-hmm.
That's one hell of an experience, and it's one, fortunately, I've not had. But I know people who've had it, and they are good people. Good people make mistakes. Good people can have an addiction, and it's not a moral failing. Mm-hmm. It may start out, in my opinion, as having fun, but eventually it's self-medicating pain. That's what the disease of addiction is. It's ineffectively managed pain that often becomes a generational cycle because the children who have pain and trauma self-medicated as adults, and some of the pain that they're then medicating was trauma from the chaos of the adults' addictions. Like if your parents go to prison when you're 10 years old, that's pretty traumatizing. Mm-hmm. That's going to set you on a different life course than someone maybe whose parents didn't have those addiction issues. Right. Or if they did, they were in recovery and could offer their children stability. That makes sense?
It does make sense. Dr. Gabor Mate claims, and his position is pretty clear, that all addiction stems from childhood trauma. I
love Gabor Mate.
I do too, but in my case,
I
never had childhood trauma. So, and maybe I did. I just don't remember it. I don't know. But I was addicted to alcohol for 32 years, and I was a compulsive gambler for almost 20. So, I have the addiction, gene, if there is one. And I think, how about this? I would say I have the competitive gene. I don't know if I'm going to label it addiction. I'm a competitor, and so are you. I'm an ex-athlete. It's like, to me, my alcohol usage wasn't escaping some horrific event. Even my gambling. To me, I was bored. I was small town Iowa. I was an athlete, good, pretty decent student, pretty popular, but we were small. I was bored. It's like we got beer. We drove around the backwoods. We drove around the gravel road. We talked about relationships and sports in college, and we drank, and that was it. We didn't get in bar fights. We didn't, obviously we drove drunk a lot, which I got very fortunate and lucky. I had a number of accidents, but I got one arrested for drunk driving like in 99. But other than that, I kind of was pretty fortunate with all the stupid things. And I'm sure you did a lot of really dumb things that we could both be sitting in prison right now. But I guess, okay, so let me ask you this question. Why do some people have the ability to just quit cold turkey, like say I did, and then others it's a continuous battle? I mean, is that something that you think is in that person's DNA, or do you think somebody just reached rock bottom so bad that they finally realized that the only thing next is death?
The grand questions of life, Jeffrey.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. I think if we could answer that, each of us could be cruising the world on a yacht right now and write a book on it. I don't know that I have the answer. I have some thoughts. I do think the science shows that substance use disorder, disease of addiction, whatever you want to call it, is genetically predisposed. Some people do have, I think, an easier time stopping than others. Some people also have more resources than others. 100%. One thing I saw in my walk, frankly, I was an upper middle class attorney. I had, and I'm obviously Caucasian, I had certain privileges unearned that other people didn't. And I speak a lot in my writing on how race and class affects addiction.
I did too. Yeah.
Not everyone comes to the table with the same playing field.
Yeah.
However, everyone has the chance to recover. And that's the hope we offer through the Hyer Calling Foundation. If you work the 12 steps, if you believe in that. But if the 12-step model of recovery does not speak to you, there are other forms of it. Smart recovery, celebrate recovery. Mm-hmm. And I often say, and I'll say it now, we're not the only game in town. I believe in the 12-step model. I mean, I named Hyer Calling Foundation after higher power. My last name played into it, but that's really not what it was about. I'd have called it the Hyer Calling Foundation regardless. Some of us are just able, I guess, to find that inner fight, but I wouldn't castigate and judge those who struggle with it. It takes a couple times, and you have to give people something to live for. We say at our foundation, when I do a lot of speaking on a national level, what we offer through a career is the meaning and the purpose and gratitude that work gives you. The purpose, in my case, I'm building a foundation to help others. The meaning from it,
Right.
I'm helping end the heartbreak of addiction, a disease my family knows very, very, very well.
Right.
I share sometimes, my mom lost her brother to suicide from untreated addiction.
Oh, wow.
I still have a family member who's in active addiction I haven't even seen in 12 years.
Yeah.
Because of him spiraling out in the wind.
Right.
So I've seen the pain of this. So the purpose to build this foundation, the meaning that I'm helping other families, and the gratitude that I got a second chance. I never thought I'd have a shot at professional redemption.
Yeah.
A lawyer developing a meth addiction isn't something people forget. It's not like saying what you had for lunch the other day.
Do you know Brian Cuban?
I do.
Yeah. I've read his book, The Ambulance Chaser. He actually donated some money at one point off Twitter into my nonprofit because he was compelled to. I shared my story with him, but he's a lawyer that talks in the depths of his practicing, and he was a pretty bad place, and he shares it, and he's become.
The law is full of addiction.
I was thinking of him when you were talking about your legal background and stuff.
Well, and like you, we're both high achievers. I know your background was in wealth management. I think sometimes those of us who have such expectations on ourselves and the pressures, in your case, just as much as mine, managing your clients' money, my clients, it's high achievers of whatever kind put stresses upon themselves,
Yeah.
And with those come rewards, obviously, but, they're demands. And one thing I love about recovery is it's helped me appreciate what matters in life. Like I've written on LinkedIn, which is I love how I met you, and I met some other amazing people. I've learned to appreciate something, and I mean this sincerely. This isn't any kind of spin. The simplicity of nature, a beautiful sunset, the marveling at the mystery of the world.
Yeah.
Like the other night I was reading about Mars, utterly random, but the fact that there's something greater out there than us. When I was before I came into recovery, I was obsessed, frankly, with money, status, prestige, and then as I got addicted. I just spiraled. I was not the best version of myself. So, if there's any silver lining to addiction, it's that as heartbreaking as it is, and as much as it takes you to hell and back, you can come out of it better off than you were before.
And it clarifies.
It
It should cut through and clarify what's important to you in your life. But I want to go back on something you said, because in my book I present this kind of an argument, I submit this as an opportunity where people have used the word predetermined, and it kind of caught my attention because I talk about the difference, and I want to ask you a question on this. Is there a difference between predetermined and predisposed? Because in my philosophically, for me, you could have the DNA gene. You could be predetermined through birth because of your alcoholism and your parents and your grandparents, and it goes on and on and on. But predisposed doesn't mean you're predetermined. It doesn't mean that you have to drink alcohol. So I think the fact you have a predisposition, I think that's an interesting nugget of knowledge that could maybe understand or explain to you why you feel the way you do. But it certainly isn't going to make you pick up alcohol and drink it.
What's also fascinating is in my family, I have a sibling who struggles with alcohol. Mm-hmm. Alcohol didn't flip that switch in my brain. I was able to drink in my college fraternity days, and I matured out of it in law school.
Right.
I was a social drinker. But when I tried cocaine and methamphetamine,
I never did that. Yep. Dude, if I'd done it, I'd been Len Bias. I'd been dead. I mean, I know for a fact right now, if there was a couple lines of coke and I would have been 20, I would have done them all.
Yeah, cocaine and stimulants are a bear because nothing releases more, in terms of the science,
dopamine.
Nothing releases more dopamine than methamphetamine, and cocaine's right up there.
Yeah.
So you get this blast of euphoria,
yeah.
But then you get the crushing depression. Oh, but what the evil of addiction is, once you have that feeling, you can't unremember it.
And
so
the swings get wider and wider, right? The highs get higher, and that's why you're chasing that higher fentanyl or whatever you want to put in your
chasing the drug.
And then the downs are worse and worse until you either decide that that's your rock bottom or you die.
or frankly, we're talking honestly here. A lot of people don't realize one of the biggest risk factors for suicide is untreated addiction. Many people who have addiction issues die by suicide because of the wreckage it leaves in its past, the ups and downs.
And they're so co-occurring, right? I mean, all these things are interrelated. So, depression, anxiety, sleep disorder, suicidal ideation, alcoholism, drug addiction. I mean, this is the problem that I have initially, Kevin, with the industry when I came into it, is this idea of mental health whack-a-mole, or it's like, we would take one problem. Oh, you're an alcoholic. And we would just spend everything on trying to get that person to quit drinking. And the reality is maybe there's 4 or 5 other things that are equally as bad that they're doing, or 2, but we tend to go after one part of the forest fire aggressively, coming in, dumping everything on it. And then the other stuff flames up and then we go run over there. And I think that's an opportunity that we kind of miss in this industry, that too many of us are really focused on one thing. And let me ask you a question. Is abstinence the only way? I mean, I went abstinence, but I know in my heart that even as an alcoholic and all that I could have a glass of wine very easily. And I say that because I do order wine when I'm out for dinner sometimes by myself, just to jokingly. I don't drink it, but I order it, and because I'm widowed, so I go on dates by myself a lot. But I'll order a nice glass of Cabernet, and the waiter will come up, wait on me, and then I won't drink it on purpose. I make sure it's an expensive one. And then he always comes back, and I'll pay the bill, and then he or she will say, I have to ask you, Mr. Johnston, obviously you liked your meal, but, did you not like the wine? And I always look up and I say the same thing every time, and I absolutely love it. I just say, I don't drink. That's it. And then they always look at me like, huh? I don't drink. And I don't go into detail. And I see them going back to their manager going, just met this weird guy. And the reason why I do it that way, I don't tell them why I don't drink, is I want them to think that this guy is so fucking anti-alcohol that he could, and he's so in control of his life, he could order a glass of wine and look at it and smell it and not drink it. Now, AA wouldn't recommend that, Kevin. I don't think in the big book they recommend going out and, but for me, again, I'm highly competitive. Alcohol isn't going to beat me. Okay. No. Alcohol is not going to be the reason why I die. Could be a meteor. Could be something else. It could be a shark eats me when I'm scuba diving. I don't know, but I know what it's not going to be. It ain't going to be drugs. And it's not going to be alcohol. That I know. And if it is drugs, then someone poisoned me. But other than that, I have no desire to ever do that stuff. So let me ask you a question again about abstinence. I mean, can people that have addiction problems have a glass of wine on a Saturday night, or is that something that's not possible?
Oh,
I'm asking you easy questions.
You know what it's like saying? No, I know. This is a great dialogue we're having. I'm enjoying this. Can you run a stop sign at 100 miles an hour and not kill yourself or anyone else? Sure, you can.
Yep.
But you're also playing with fire when you do it.
Right.
Are there people that could probably go drink on a Saturday night and get out of it unscathed? Yeah, I'm sure it happens. I know it does. I mean, relapses happen. For me personally, I'm 100% sober. Now, does alcohol tempt me? It really doesn't. The devil on my shoulder comes in the form of stimulants. I loved cocaine and methamphetamine. I love there's and anyone listening to this who's been addicted to stimulants knows what it is. Stimulants are infamous for their legendary high. Yeah. But then they have the crippling depression, and they're very addictive. And that's the one substance that has really no MAT, medicated assisted treatment for it.
Yep.
If you're addicted to coke or meth, ultimately it's the 12-step model, counseling, behavioral therapy. Right. Now, that doesn't make it any less real.
Right.
But you don't have things like naloxone for that, or methadone, okay? Suboxone. So, to answer your question, I personally would not want to try to use any mind-altering substances. I guess I'm pretty progressive when it comes to harm reduction, although like you, I wasn't always. I am for myself pretty conservative. I come from the model that AA and NA says that this is an incurable, progressive, and fatal disease. We're men and women who suffer from the disease of addiction, for which there is no known cure, but it can be arrested. I'm quoting some of their literature with that.
I love it.
Because the problem is there are drug addicts. I no problem calling myself. That's what I am, recovering one. And labels, when we own labels, are not so scary. okay, have become alcoholics, even though that wasn't their first drug of choice. You know, so to answer your question, sure, I bet there are people, but there are also people that end up getting seriously addicted and dying. And that's what's so scary about this disease. It's progressive. It gets worse and worse and worse. And then you die from it. Or if you don't die, sometimes it's even worse. You know, there's the chaos in your life, you know, that your family sees, how painful it is watching someone spiraling.
Oh,
and often
worst,
the children,
it's the worst ever.
Whether it's your children or nieces and nephews, whatever minors are in your life that are dependent on you, getting hurt by the chaos in your life, they often go up to trauma, grow up, to self-medicate it. You know, parents incarcerated, does so much harm on children, you know, and the parents' guilt, you know, there's just such heartbreak around this. So
yeah,
my
the collateral damage is horrific. But, you know, I got, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's just our big passion is to give people as much of a second chance as possible. We call it hitting reset. And that in doing that, we save their lives, we give them a more peaceful life, and we start to cut off the cycle of addiction.
Yeah. I had someone ask me the other day, it's like, they were struggling with their drinking and all that. And they've asked me how I did it, you know, like I had some secret sauce to give them that they could quit drinking. And I said that I had such an intense desire to quit because Seth died, and then watching my wife pretty much, you know, I guess suicide by alcohol, I would say, you know, watching her literally drink herself to death, is when I quit and I stopped drinking, I guess, I realized after a period of time, Kevin, that it was easier for me not to drink than to drink, that the not drinking became easier. And that was my road of least resistance. The road of least resistance wasn't to go get drunk to hide from pain and all that. That was actually the road of more resistance. The road of least resistance where I ended up on is a road now where, you know, fairly pragmatic person. It's just easier for me not to drink. It's just that's that conscious decision I made. That's probably built from a subconscious or an unconscious desire that I want to honor Seth and Prudence the best that I can. And I can't do that. And my granddaughter too, you know, when Seth died, his daughter was born 3 weeks later, which is the name of our app, Brighton, is thinking in the back of my head, boy, it's so much easier not to drink. It's just easier not to have that sip because, you know, I say I could have one glass, but I know what one glass would turn into. I like it too much. I would have a whole bottle, and then I would be back to maybe 2 nights later, have another glass. And I know me too well that I think I'd slowly kind of get back. I don't think I'd be back to 7-day-a-week alcoholic I was, but I'm pretty certain that I would be overconfident that I've got this thing whipped, you know, and I don't think I think that's one thing about in recovery that I like is that you're acknowledging that this is a lifetime, you know, you're never out of recovery. No. It's
a lifetime illness.
Yeah, once you're in it, you're in it forever. But I will tell you this, in my book, I talked about this, is, you know, I know when you sit down in a meeting, you say, hey, I'm Jeff, I'm an alcoholic. I started thinking to myself, well, if alcohol is a disease, and let's take something like an eating disorder, let's say that's a disease too. Well, if I'm really overweight, and I go to Overweight Eaters Anonymous, and I'm sitting around a table of a bunch of people that are overweight, and I say, hi, I'm Jeff, I'm fat. You know, and then everyone says, hey, Jeff, you know, thanks for acknowledging you're fat. You know, we all talk about our problems. And then two months later, I lose weight. I'm not overweight or anything. I've lost 30 or 40 pounds. And I come into the meeting. I'm not going to say, hey, I'm Jeff, I'm fat. I'm not going to say that because I'm not fat anymore. So I'm like, okay, so I don't tell people, hey, I'm Jeff, I'm an alcoholic. I'm not an alcoholic anymore. So for me, I'm not an alcoholic. I just don't drink. And so I've used this stoicism reframing talent of mine to kind of look at it as if I was overweight and I went to Overeaters Anonymous and I said, hey, I'm Jeff, I'm fat. If I came back later and lost all that weight, I wouldn't say, hey, I'm fat. I would say, hey, I'm Jeff and I'm back. I feel better. I feel great. So I've always been perplexed on why people have to acknowledge in front of other people that they're still an alcoholic when they don't drink. I want to tap your brain on that. I know there's a utility in the community giving you lots of love. I get that, but
I think you just hit it.
Is that the only reason you think why people acknowledge? Because I I'm trying to get people to say, hey, if you don't drink anymore, you're not an alcoholic. And I don't have any medical background, but I'm just trying to get people to quit telling themselves that they're an alcoholic. They just don't drink alcohol.
I mean this very sincerely. The longer that
maybe I'm naive.
I can only speak from my walk. The more I meet people in recovery professionally as well as personally, this is so dependent sometimes on individual circumstances.
Yeah.
And what addiction very much is.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the backstory? Whatever it takes to keep you from harming yourself and the loved ones you have is probably what works. So
is that the pathway? Is that the pathway, Kevin, that people talk about? Everyone's recovery pathway is different.
Yes, and it's not just a cliche or something
Right.
nice to say. I think it's true.
Yeah.
If for you want to say I'm an ex-alcoholic, it doesn't really matter what you call yourself. You can call yourself whatever you want.
Right.
Are you staying sober?
Correct.
Or if you are using, is it generating problems?
Right.
I know people that would say they're an ex-addict. I know some people that would say they're a recovering addict.
Yeah.
And there's some people who still say they're addicts.
Well, now they just say I'm in recovery. That basically covers everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
Does. I think the words and the semantics are really less important because ultimately this is all self-reported. That's why when people talk about how long they've been sober, it's a wonderful metric, but it's what they're sharing with you. No one knows at 2 a.m. what you're doing on a Saturday night.
But do you think there's a mindset difference if you and I are talking and I say, hey, Kevin, I'm an alcoholic, or hey, Kevin, I'm in recovery, or hey, Kevin, I don't drink? I think there is how you present that from your mouth. I think psychologically could be different how you say that. So I'm acknowledging the fact that I have a drinking issue, but the way I'm presenting it, it just seems, hey, I'm an alcoholic is so self-defeating. It's so like whipping yourself.
Words matter.
Yeah.
Recovery dialects, what they call it. The words we use do matter.
Yeah.
You referenced the utility
Yeah.
of speaking in front of others and having a sense of community. Yeah. I think a sense of community does go a very long way.
I do too.
For me, in my personal recovery, in the 12-step community here in Philadelphia and to a lesser degree down in Richmond, Virginia, where I spend a little bit of time, it does help to have people you can talk to. It helps to know that these people, just want to see you recover. Yeah. They have no other agenda. They're not trying to sell you something. They're not trying to date you. They're not trying to do anything other than support you as a brother and sister in recovery.
All right. So I have a goal. I have something for you I want you to do. Okay. I am anti-harm reduction. I'm not. I'm just role-playing with you. Okay. Convince me why harm reduction is needed.
Absolutely. It saves lives. You got to meet people where they're at first. All right. If somebody still needs to use drugs, should they? No. Is it deadly? Yes. Is it dangerous? Absolutely. Yeah. But you have to start somewhere to get someone to move where you want them to go. So if somebody came to me and said, I used to do meth, but now I'm doing coke. Because if you put a gun to my head, cocaine is less dangerous than methamphetamine, although it can still wreck your life. Mm-hmm. I'd say, great, we're making progress. Your use of cocaine is going to kill you if you don't stop. Okay, it will. However, it may not happen tomorrow. It may not happen next week. It may not happen next year. It could happen tomorrow. Right. What you're doing is dangerous, but it's not. Here's the rub. It's not a character issue. Your use of drugs or alcohol in and of itself is not a morality issue, but it's dangerous. It could kill you, and it could hurt the other people in your life.
I like that.
So think to yourself, when you do this, my mother said, I'm very real. Picture me laid out in a casket because I'm going to die of a stroke potentially if you overdosed again.
Wow.
Now, I'm not blaming her. I think what she said is true. If I overdosed on drugs, that could do a lot of harm to my family. So is what I'm doing in and of itself necessarily wrong? I don't think it is.
Right.
But you need to reduce the harm. So however you do it. So picture how it affects the people in your life. But once you get them to a point where they're ready to get away from substances, it takes some time. Like think of any other change in your life.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
Right. You open your minds, look at even social progress around race, LGBT rights, lots of things people evolve on.
Yeah.
I think it's
the recovery space to me is so interesting and fascinating because there's so many right ways to do it. It seems like there's more right ways than there are wrong ways. There's only a handful of wrong ways, just, go back to using. But how many ways you can, whether it's, your God is something that drives your faith and not wanting to use, or it's your children. In my case, my 2 remaining boys. Is it my dad who's 90 that I'm so fortunate he didn't die last summer when we were on tour? He had a stomach aneurysm and he shouldn't be here. I mean, he was dead. We were 12 hours from pulling the plug. My 3 brothers and I met I was for pulling the plug. My other brother was. We had one brother that was against it. But based on all the data we had at my dad's age, it was like a 5% survival rate. And if he did survive, he was going to be in a really bad position in a hospital. And my dad is an outdoorsman. But the reality was my dad lived. He's home now. I go over and I watch the Super Bowl at his place. I watch the Hawks. And I pinch myself how lucky I am to have this opportunity. So there are really good reasons to live. And this hopelessness and this, lack of purpose and meaning that people that are in the depths of addiction have, clouds their judgment in a way to look at how really great things they do have in their life that they don't realize, that they're so wrapped up in themselves that they lose focus of how many people really care about them. And think of the 825 people a day die, okay? And I say this when I talk is like, okay, that's a death statistic, right? Think of the 825 Americans that die of the deaths of despair. How many individuals are impacted by those 825 that die? I mean, it's in the millions probably. We take cousins and nieces and nephews and coworkers, and it's the collateral damage, the ripple effect through the universe is just horrific. And then you go further. Think of the families that haven't had death yet. And you don't think there's destruction and decimation and devastation in those families? Of course there. You don't have to have death to destroy a family.
Well, that's why I've said sometimes death is actually, I never want to say it's preferable.
I know what you're saying.
People getting arrested.
Yeah.
The domestic violence, sometimes sexual assault. I mean, this disease is heartbreaking.
And the people that come out of Narcan saying, "Why'd you save me?" You've heard that. Yeah.
I haven't actually, but I can.
No, but you haven't heard it personally, but I've heard the stories where first responders can say, we saved somebody that's his fifth overdose, and they'll come out and they really, it's like suicide by cop. It's like they wanted to die. And so they kind of were thinking that, why did I get saved? But, so you've convinced me. I think harm reduction is something that I go back and look at our situation. It's like Seth died in a hotel room with the doors locked by himself. So Narcan wouldn't have done any good, Kevin, unless somebody was there. You can't Narcan yourself. But imagine if Seth was in a situation where there would have been 4 or 5 people and somebody had Narcan. Maybe that moment that he came out of that Narcan, maybe that was his epiphany moment like I had on December 24th, 17 when I quit drinking, and maybe he'd still be here. So I'm all for anything saving lives. I don't care.
Well, it's not mutually exclusive. Like we can help people reduce harm while also saying this is an incurable, progressive, and fatal illness.
Good point. Right.
It's not one or the other. What I'd also add something, you referenced small town Iowa. What I find interesting about this disease is whether you are in New York City, LA, or if you call a town in the heartland, this disease has the same heartbreak. Rich, poor, black or white, whatever your faith tradition.
Right.
Some people have more resources to get out of it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the heartbreak it has on families is the same.
Well, I had someone tell me too, Kevin, it's like, there's such this big emphasis on fentanyl. I mean, fentanyl is like the top of every conversation. It's like weapon of mass destruction. You hear Biden in his speech says the word fentanyl. I mean, how often did we ever hear, presidents actually name these synthetic opioids by name? Normally it's addiction and substance abuse, but you've got fentanyl such a focus that, man, it's almost distracting us from the other issues that aren't fentanyl related. And I can see us just as humans just chasing fentanyl. Like, hey, if we can get fentanyl off the planet, more people are going to live. And the reality is there's no evidence that if we took all the fentanyl off the planet, that people would stop dying. The reality is most people that have issues are going to find something else. Exactly. And the drug dealers already know that.
Yeah, xylazine.
Yep. Was it Trank or something?
Trank, exactly. Stimulants do plenty of damage, and classic, plain old-fashioned alcohol.
Yeah.
The one criticism I sometimes hear is that in such an awareness about the opioid overdose epidemic, we're not seeing the damage that meth, which is what I was addicted to. Meth doesn't kill you overnight.
100%, man. Iowa has a huge meth problem. I mean, substantially more. I know an organization
Figure
that
out west and east.
I know an organization. Well, we have and farmers have the anhydrous ammonia. We have all the chemicals to make meth here in the Midwest because of all the emphasis on farming. Because there's a lot of chemicals that was used in farming, especially the ammonia.
Yeah.
But
So
it's like, I guess my goal as an advocate is to create the awareness, present the issue to the public, and then have these dialogues where we can start getting people moved in the right direction. We're coming up on me having to cut this off. A little bit about the Hyer Calling. What do you do each day? What's your overall objective? How do people reach you? People are going to know more about you through Living Undeterred because we're going to make some announcements on our tour stop in Philly, and I'm really excited to partner with you guys and punch this thing right in the face.
Yeah, absolutely. Our website is hyercalling.org, but it's spelled HYER calling.org, which is my last name. We're a 501c3. We charge nothing to individuals. If you are in recovery, we will not turn you away for a general consult. That's our gift to the recovery community. We turn no one away for a basic consultation. Now, there are eligibility requirements for certain services.
Right.
If you are in recovery and you come to us, we will help you figure out what it might look like to get a second chance at a career. And we have a host of different services, from helping people expunge criminal convictions to job placement assistance, reference advocacy, which I really enjoy. That's going back to a former employer and saying, look, I get you can't take them back, but is there a way we can get an endorsement on something they did well to help them move on with their life? We help you get interview attire. We'll help you get to interviews. We'll even pay for your transportation costs till you get your first paycheck.
Yeah, that's great.
Mentoring programs, internships and externships, obviously interview preparation, resume review. I could go even beyond that. We do a ton of different things.
It's like coaching, a bridge. It's like a bridge, right? It's like a bridge metaphorically.
Yeah.
Helping people.
What we do is we're narrow. It's a niche of more depth rather than breadth, but it's how to get someone back into the workplace so that they can secure it and then maintain it. During your first year of employment, we'll walk with you along, and there's limitations on some of this, but we will help you stabilize that first year. We offer coaching through the International Coach Federation. That's something businesses spend thousands on for their executive team, and we can offer for free. And if you go to our website, you can look into how you could get it. And again, we never ever charge an individual for it. Our revenue comes from donations and selling management training and corporate sponsorship.
Well, listen, man, I love you like a brother. Really appreciate your intentions and what you're trying to do and to save lives. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's really what we're all trying to do. And we need to, because the ship that we're on is wiltering to it's slowly sinking, and
it's all hands on deck.
I love that. It's a phrase I use frequently. I love it. And it's all angles. We need the alcohol experts. We need the drug experts. We need the, people that have dealt with suicide. We need, mental health all together. So, hey, listen, really enjoyed your appearance, and you and I aren't going anywhere apart. So I'm looking forward to coming to Philly and promoting the heck out of that stop. So thanks a lot again. I look forward to touching base with you. Okay, Kevin?
Sounds good.
All right, man. Thanks.